There we go. But yeah, we'll be covering, the returning volunteer material. Like I said, it's stuff you've seen before, so we're going to kind of go pretty quickly through it. But if at any point you need me to slow down, feel free to do so. I will let our other instructors introduce themselves. Miss Denise, Miss Karen, are y'all here?
I am here. Good evening, everyone. Of course, for those of you who don't know, I am Denise Williams. I am a site coordinator at the headquarters, which is at 1005 Tillman, which is where I have been for the last, I believe, six seasons. I enjoy what I do, and I hope that you do too, which is the reason why a lot of you have returned to this session. I look forward to working with each of you. And of course, we are available, Karen and myself, if you have any concerns. As Hunter has already stated, if we go just a little bit too fast, ask us to slow down so we can go back and cover. But as stated, a lot of this information is repeated, and that's not, which is, of course, they've revised the 13614C, and those of you who have been keeping up, you've seen that, and we're going to discuss that. But thank you again, and welcome, welcome, welcome.
All right. Thank you, Miss Denise. Um,
Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hello, everyone. With the snow and with the fires and with all the bad thing that's happening in the world today, look at us. We're trying to help people. And I just applaud everybody for coming back. I know that you're here because you want to learn some more and help some more people. So I just welcome you back.
Good to see you too. I almost skipped over you. Your name's coming up as Andrea Eccles. I didn't know if you were in here or not. But we're happy. We're all happy that you're here. And like she said, I'm happy to see all of y'all. I'm looking forward. I'm really excited about this season. All right, let me share my screen and we can get started. All right, can everyone see that?
You may want to make it a little bigger for those of us who can't see.
Sure thing. Give me 1 second. That better?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So this is the agenda for tonight. It's really, really similar to the one from last year. So I'll get us started. We'll look at responsibilities as a VITA program volunteer, talk about volunteer roles, changes for the upcoming season, training topics, credits, refundable and non-refundable, taxpayer requirements, volunteer tools and resources, and then we'll take a look at the 3 certification tests that you'll need to take if you're a site coordinator or an assistant coordinator. There's another one, but we'll cover that one in the site coordinator trainings. We'll look at these 3 tonight. So to get started, we'll talk about the Volunteer Protection Act. The Volunteer Protection Act is really what protects us from any liability when we prepare and file the taxes, because serving as volunteers, meaning, we're not receiving a certain level of compensation or anything else of value, as a form of compensation for doing this type of work. We are volunteers, so we have protections of liability. We serve as volunteers completing the tax returns. That's why it's so important that we remind the taxpayers that, they are the ones responsible for the accuracy of the information on the return. We do our best to go by what the forms say, but for a lot of the stuff, we have to take their word for it. So we really want to make sure that they know that, hey, if you're giving me false information, this isn't going to come back on me. I'm protected by the Volunteer Protection Act. That means I do not have the liability here. So we need to always remind our taxpayers that it's important for them too to make sure they're giving us the right information. But it's also good for us to know that, if we accidentally make a mistake, we don't have to worry about going to jail or anything. We are protected as volunteers, so long as we are doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, as long as we're following the volunteer standards of conduct that we'll look at in a moment, as long as we're adhering to our quality site requirements and just, doing our jobs the way that we are supposed to be doing them, then we are protected from liability through this Protection Act. The next thing we'll look at, so I mentioned two things, quality site retirements and the volunteer standards of conduct. The volunteer standards of conduct, that's one of the three tests we'll have to take are specifically over these standards of conduct. We'll take some time to review these. You'll need to pass this test with at least an 80% or higher, and there are 10 questions, so you need to get at least 8 out of 10 of them right. The volunteer standards of conduct are really what guide us when facing different ethical issues that might arise in unexpected situations. So it's always good to review these. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory, but we'll take a look at all of them just to go through them. The number one, the first volunteer standard of conduct is to follow all quality site requirements. We'll take a look at the QSRs in the next section, but that's just to ensure the quality and accuracy of the tax return and the consistency of the operations at the sites. So we just always have to be in compliance with those requirements, and that's just the first part of our standard of conduct. Number two, do not accept payment, ask for donations, or accept refund payments for federal or state tax return preparation for customers. I really am appreciative when people are so happy with our service that they feel obliged and compelled to give us money. I really, I appreciate it, but I always tell them, as grateful as I am for this, I cannot take your money. It is against our standards of conduct, and doing so would jeopardize our whole operation, which again, while I'm appreciative of you trying to hand me this 20, would cost way more than $20 if we were to lose our grant funding, for example. So we cannot take any kind of payment, any donation, anything like that. If someone wants to deposit part of their refund in one of our accounts, if they offer to do that, we can't do that. We basically can take no money. So that's a pretty easy one to abide by. I have told clients before though that, if they want to bring a fresh, some fresh baked cookies, I don't think there's anything against taking fresh baked cookies. So I do like baked goods, but in terms of money or cash or anything monetary, we cannot take that. The volunteer standards of conduct number three, do not solicit business from taxpayers you help or use the information gained about them, taxpayer information, for any direct or indirect personal benefit for yourself, any other specific individual or organization. So essentially, when they share their personal information with us, that's to be used exclusively for the tax return that we're preparing. We don't need to think of there could be, an entrepreneurial opportunity where we want to follow up with them after it. We cannot do that. They are sharing things with us solely for the purpose of getting their taxes done. That's information that is shared in confidence. So, even if we do think, oh, this person has a great self business, and I think there's a lot of opportunities with my business, unfortunately, we cannot pursue those conversations or follow up with taxpayers using their personal information they provided to us for doing their taxes. We always need to make sure that we're just sticking to tax preparation, just doing the volunteer service that we're doing and not using their information or any connections they might have beyond just preparing their taxes. Do not knowingly prepare false returns is the fourth standard of conduct. This one is pretty straightforward. We are, IRS certified volunteers, so don't commit tax fraud. That's pretty easy in my opinion. You know, if we again have to use the information that is provided to us through the taxpayer, but ultimately, like, it's on them to provide us with accurate information. But if there's ever a point where we like know that we're working with false information or we intentionally falsify information, at that point, we are violating the standard of conduct. Everything that we do based on our information that we know and that's provided us to the taxpayer, we need to be doing as accurately as we can. So if we ever, do something that we know is incorrect or false, that's a violation of this. And sometimes, the temptation there might be if we can think of something that might be beneficial to the taxpayer, but if, we also know that they're not eligible for that credit or they don't qualify for that deduction or whatever it may be, then, truly we're doing a disservice for them if we try and apply that, because the IRS might audit them for that 6 months, 2 years down the road, and they end up much worse off than if they were just getting the actual refund or the actual amount owed that they were due when we filed their return. So really just do everything accurately based on the information provided to us, and then we'll be fine. Volunteer standard of conduct number 5, do not engage in criminal, infamous, dishonest, notoriously disgraceful conduct or any other conduct considered to have a negative effect on the VITA TCE program. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Don't do anything notoriously disgraceful. I don't, that's kind of a broad definition, but just keep it professional, keep it, a volunteer slash work environment. And yeah, that should be fine. Don't be flipping any tables. I know people can be frustrating at times. I've been there, I promise, but just keep it professional, keep it calm, and get through that return as quickly as you can. That's how I've approached those situations, and it's worked out so far. Um, yeah, just don't engage in criminal activity, I guess. Treat all taxpayers in a professional, courteous, and respectful manner. So going back to working with people, yeah, people can be frustrating at times, but it's never really intended to be targeted at me. Most of the frustrations that people have are with their tax situation and with the IRS, which, that's fair. But I just happen to be the voice there, or the person there to hear it. So, we do get some people that are frustrated, but just always keep professional, try and de-escalate if they are frustrated. Give the best advice you can, be respectful. And, if someone takes it a step too far, we always can ask people to leave, or deny people service if they are, making it personal or going a step above what, is tolerable. So know that you don't have to deal with that if they reach that point or go beyond that point. But in general, people might be frustrated. They might have been waiting in line. So it's up to us to kind of set the tone for the conversation, and do that by being professional, cool-headed, courteous, respectful. And then just due diligence, just making sure that, we're doing our due diligence, again, to make sure the return is as accurate as it can be, that we're following all these standards of conduct, and that we're following our quality site requirements. And just, making sure that if they want to show up and, it's a surprise site review, that we are ready to go, because we don't have to change anything for the site reviews, because we're always operating within our codes of conduct, within our quality site requirements, and that we're doing our due diligence to make sure we're doing everything correctly, doing it accurately, and, in compliance with the rules that we have from the IRS. All right, and then we'll take a look at the quality site requirements. So this is kind of the other section of the rules that we have. Number one is no, okay. Number one is just certification. So any return being worked on by volunteers, those volunteers must have the appropriate certification to work on that return. So, if it is a greeter or screener who has only done standards of conduct or intake interview, they should not actually be preparing a return. If it's a return that has, an advanced level topic on it, then the return only should be completed by someone with the advanced level certification. Everyone at the site who is volunteering must have their certification completed before they start volunteering, before their first shift. We have to make sure that we have all their paperwork signed and everything on file before they're able to volunteer. So, you want to get those certifications as quickly as you can, and then pass those over to me and Matt, so we can make sure that we sign forms, just because, as someone working on taxes without the proper certification is a violation of this policy, and that would be a very, very bad look on us, because if they're not certified in it, chances are they might not have been properly trained on it, which might lead to a bad return, or one of our clients being in a really bad situation. So we just want to avoid all that and make sure all of our volunteers have their certification prior to their first shift volunteering. Site requirement number two is the intake interview and quality review process. So just, we want to make sure that we have to go through the intake form. Also, side note, I have always called that the II form for intake interview, and Matt only recently brought to my attention that other people don't do that. So if you've ever heard me say the II form, I mean the yellow form. I don't, what's the number for it? The 13, is it 13615, 13614? But yeah,
13614C.
thank you. I've always called that the II form, and I don't know why. I thought everyone else did that, II for intake interview, but Matt told me that I was the only one that did that, so I was not aware of that. So if you ever hear me say II form, I'm talking about the intake form. So we want to make sure that we're going through the intake form. We're making sure it's completed. It needs to be completed. Both the taxpayer portion needs to be completed. Anything that's checked as maybe needs to either be a yes or a no. And then before the return is over, all the grayed out sections that need to be completed by a coordinator or a volunteer, those need to be completed as well. The II form needs to be fully filled out by the time the taxpayer leaves and by the time we finish the return. And then in terms of quality reviewing, this is nothing new to y'all, but just making sure we have at least 2 people on each return. That's the requirement that we have, is that one person does the preparation and another person conducts a quality review with the taxpayer. So just, if there's ever a situation where you are the only volunteer at a site and there's no one else certified to work with you, then you might need to tell people like, hey, we can start the intake, but we're going to have to find another time for you to come pick it up because I'm only one person. We do not do peer-to-peer quality review. It has to be a second set of eyes. So we would need at least 2 certified volunteers at each site to conduct preparation and then another conduct quality review. And that's just a big part of it. We cannot do peer-to-peer. You cannot do, I'm sorry, I'm not meaning peer-to-peer. We do peer-to-peer quality review. You cannot do self-quality review. You cannot do self-review. We only do peer-to-peer. So you need at least 2 people there, and cannot do it alone. Here we go. Site requirement number 3, confirming photo identification and taxpayer identification numbers. So this, we have to make sure that we're verifying identification. On tax returns, we need to see a photo ID from primary taxpayer and the spouse if they're married filing jointly. And then we'll need to see social security cards or ITINs for anyone on the return. So that can be primary taxpayer, spouse, and any dependents that are being claimed. If they're, if their name's going on the tax return, we need to see a social security card for them. And we need to verify that everything we're putting in matches up the social security card as correctly and accurately as we can. So, if you get a social security card that has maybe, a name with 4 names on it, then talk to the taxpayer. Like, hey, ask what is your last name on government documents? Sometimes if I think there's any doubt, I'll see if they filed with us before and look up what was accepted by the IRS when they filed last year. Just doing everything I can to make sure that what I'm putting into TaxSlayer matches up as closely as it can to what is on the Social Security card, and making sure I'm checking that for anyone on the return and photo IDs for the taxpayer and the spouse if married filing jointly. Site requirement number 4 is just reference materials. So we just need to have the following materials available at the site. Most of these we have available digitally. They'll be on the laptop, so you'll always have access to those. And we do have physical copies of a few of those, especially the signs like, I think it's the privacy, confidentiality, and civil rights. We've got a sign for that. And just we'll have other physical copies we can keep at the sites, but a lot of these like 17 and the 4012, those are available online that we'll have accessible digitally, but we just always have to have access to those at the site. Quality site requirement number 5 is the volunteer agreement. So just once you complete the volunteer standards of conduct, this will just be, the form that you will sign off, and then you'll send it to Matt or I, and we'll sign it. This is one we'll store on file that we have to have on file before you're able to start volunteering. This is pretty much the last step in, getting certified. Is once you finish all of your certification exams, you will digitally sign the volunteer agreement on your Lincoln Learn portal, and then you can just send that to either me or Matt, and we'll sign it on our end, and we'll make sure that we have that on record. And then as coordinators, if you're a site coordinator, you're going to make sure that if you get new volunteers that are coming to your site, make sure either check online on the drive that Matt and I have received their volunteer agreement, or if they bring it to you and they haven't sent one to us yet, if they bring it to you, make sure that you take their volunteer agreement and that you hold that on record and send that either to me or Matt, or find a way to either email it to us or bring it by our office. Just make sure that we don't have any volunteers that are serving at the site that don't have their certifications done, and that we don't have their signed volunteer agreement on record. If you are the one that you have a new volunteer and you're serving as coordinator and you get someone who's bringing a new volunteer agreement, make sure that we're checking their identification on that first time when we receive that form. Just making sure, everything matches up to the form and their ID, that they are who they say they are. before we get them volunteering and doing their first shift. Number 6 is just timely filing of tax returns. So essentially, this is just making sure that we don't start a return and it just kind of get stuck and forgotten. Making sure that we are filing those returns in a timely process. Once we finish with the taxpayer, ideally it should be done. The coordinators who are submitting the returns to the IRS, they should be filed within the day that they're completed with the taxpayer. Ideally, a taxpayer will come in, we'll work with them, we'll do a quality review with them. The return will be completely signed off on. They'll have their signed copy and they'll have a copy of it and they'll be good to go. And then at the end of that day, it'll be filed and sent to the IRS. We just want to make sure that, the worst situation is when we think someone's all done and, they either owed money or they were due a refund and everything on their end's good. They've signed off and they've left and we think it's filed. And then, I get a call in July and they're like, hey, I never got my refund. What's up? And I log into TaxSlayer and I just see it marked as like completed. I've had to have just a few of those conversations and people are understanding, but they are not the most fun conversations to have. So let's be checking that, regularly checking TaxSlayer. If you do see one that was started a while back and it's marked as complete, check the notes on it. Let's make sure we're leaving notes, in the notes section of TaxSlayer saying, if they need to come back for something or a missing form or whatever it is, make sure that we're documenting that within TaxSlayer. That way we don't have a return that looks like it's complete, but it's just sitting there, leaving anyone confused as to whether it needs to be transmitted or not. If it's ready to be transmitted, let's transmit it that day. If it's not ready to be transmitted, then let's make sure that that's really clear to anyone who might be reviewing TaxSlayer that this one is outstanding for this reason and this reason and so and so. Civil rights, just, we have to make sure that all the taxpayers at our sites can see the information. We have big posters, so just making sure that these posters are hung up at your site in a location where taxpayers will be able to see them. Whether this is like a waiting room or when they walk in, just somewhere where it's visible to all of our clients because these posters, this information needs to be where they can see it. So just making sure we have that up at the site at all time. Number 8 is just making sure we use the correct site identification number, which we do. I really think y'all have to worry too much about that. I guess if you are a coordinator and you're setting up a prepare, setting up a volunteer, making sure that we're using the correct site identification number for their TaxSlayer accounts. But otherwise, that's not really something that comes up a lot when you're preparing the return. I will say it's important if you work at multiple sites, make sure that you are logged into the right TaxSlayer account for the site you're at, just because it's easy for a return to get lost if that's not the case. Same thing for number 9, making sure we're using the correct electronic filing identification number. We haven't had any issues with that in the past, so just, I don't really know when that comes up in the process of filing a return, but again, it might come up when you are making an account for someone, or if it does, just make sure you're using the right EFIN for your location. If you ever have any questions about your EFIN, or if that comes up, you can contact me and I can get you the information, immediately. And lastly, the security, privacy, and confidentiality. This is another resource document that must be available at the site. Making sure, again, this is somewhere where, it's accessible. So this is available electronically. So just making sure that you know how to access that if you need it. Having it bookmarked on the laptops if you want to make it easier. Just have everything accessible if you ever need it, knowing that it's there and being able to access it. Yeah, so those are the volunteer standards of conduct and the quality site requirements. I do not think they've changed since last year, but they're very important, so we want to take some time to review those. And I will now hand it off.
Denise?
Denise, if you're talking, I think you might be on mute.
I'm on mute, but I'm trying to find my document to share.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Okay, so I have my document, but it's not allowing me to share as of yet. Let's see. There you go. Can you see that?
I see it.
You see it? Okay, good. Okay, so this portion, we are talking about the volunteer roles. Let me get down where I can get to where I need to be. Seems like regardless of how much practicing you do, you still mess up, don't you? Okay, so on this, in this pub, this is 5101. And in this pub, it talks about the volunteer roles and it starts on page 13, which I am not at page 13. I'm trying to see, can I get it there? Nope. Okay, so what we have, okay, for the greeters, we know that the greeters must complete and pass the standards of conduct training. You welcome everyone visiting the site to create a pleasant atmosphere, making sure they know where the bathrooms are as well as accommodating disabled people as much as possible. You ensure that the customers sign in on the client sign-in sheet. Next, the Form 13614C, and if applicable, the 14446 should be given to the client to complete along with a writing utensil. You schedule and document your hours because that's very important. Next, we have the screener. The screener completes and passes volunteer standards of conduct training and the intake interview training. You assist clients with completing all forms necessary for tax assistance. You verify all documents to ensure that the clients meet qualifications for the free tax assistance. You add up all income, as we know in past and probably present, that people will come in stating they didn't know how much the limit was for them to receive our services. And of course, for the screener, if you are fortunate to have a screener, you need to add up all of those because this year the total amount is, I believe, $67,000. So if they're over that, then we won't be able to provide them with our services. You check for the Social Security cards for all on the return. You ask them about identity theft pins per letters that they should have been given or by way of mail, probably latter part of December. And you assign the clients to the tax preparers based on their certification level. And lastly, you schedule and document your volunteer hours. Here is the screener. You want to ask them about the 1095A form. Of course, we know that a lot of people, when you say the 1095A form, they go blank. So you have to break it down to them and let them know we're talking about the marketplace insurance or the Obamacare. And then for some of them, then it really hits and they understand. If they don't have the form, we have blank forms that we can give to them and along with a phone number. And for those of you who may not have that phone number, I'm going to recite it now twice. That number is 1-800-318-2596. Again, that number is 1-800-318-2596. Any questions thus far?
Denise, what you're showing on the screen is
It's
the.
not, it's just that I just wanted to put it up to show them where to go to.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, you know, for anything they may have, any questions they may have about any of these roles. Okay, so now any other questions about what we've covered thus far? Okay, the tax preparer. The tax preparer must complete standards of conduct training, interview intake training, and basic or advanced training. You provide your free tax return preparation for eligible customers. If there is a discrepancy on the 13614C, which we will talk about in depth later, the taxpayer will get clarification, tax preparer will get clarification from the customer. If you are to schedule and document, you are to schedule and document your volunteer hours because that's very important. The site coordinator. The site coordinator must verify that all volunteers are properly credited for the work at the sites. They create a process to verify the level of certification for each volunteer and that they have passed and signed Form 13615, which is the Volunteer Standards of Conduct Agreement. The coordinator must also confirm the volunteer's identity using the government-issued photo verification and develop and maintain schedules for all volunteers to ensure that there is adequate coverage, supplies, and equipment at that site. They are to review with the preparers the tax alerts, and they are to recruit volunteers with special skills such as bilingual language and hearing impaired. Ensure the volunteer standards and intake standards are followed. Determine when to stop taking customers based on the staff. Have a process in place when there is inclement weather to make sure that everyone who's coming or who's a part of it know what to do and that we're closed. Make certain that all rejects are resolved within the 3-day time frame. E-file tax returns timely. Prepare and submit Form 13206 that reports the volunteer's name and number of years for the yearly recognition. And again, we want to make certain that we schedule volunteers and the volunteers are in contact with the site coordinator so that we can have adequate coverage. And lastly, the quality reviewer, they must be tax certified at the advanced or military level if those returns are being prepared at that site. You engage the taxpayer in the review process. Compare all information provided by the taxpayer on Form 13614C and supporting documents against the completed return entries, and if necessary, use your reference materials to verify that the tax law determinations are correct. So we don't expect you to walk around with all this knowledge in your head, but the key is knowing where that you can go in your resource material to find out what it is that you need on anything that you're doing at the tax sites. They also use the quality review checklist in the pub and make certain that the return prepared is not out of scope. They mentor and help the preparers while conducting quality reviews. Are there any questions? Okay, we rocking and rolling. It's on you, Karen. Thank you all.
I have a question, Miss Denise.
You had your hand up, Faye.
Yep,
I'm sorry, okay. Karen, you got to help me when we're doing it. All right, come on, Faye.
yeah. My question is about the threshold. You said it's 67,000. That's for single, right?
That's for anyone who's coming for our service.
And if it is
On
a
the
couple,
67,000 per tax return.
oh, per tax, even if it is a couple, it will be 67,000.
It's right. If one is making 32 and the other is making 32, we will do it. But if their income together is over 67, we cannot service them per our guidelines.
Understood. Thank you.
Got it. I had a question too before I go any further. I was taking a roll of the people who have signed in, and the person's name who is Paula. I've got two Paulas and the last name starts with a G. Are you signed on twice, or do we actually have two Paulas with the same last initial?
It's a Paula Gardner.
Yeah, and the other one had a Paula G when I was taking the roll, so that's why I asked. Maybe,
My initials, ma'am.
Hi, this is Paula.
okay.
I'm had to do Zoom on my phone and look at the materials on my computer because my laptop does not have a speaker or I can't hear you on the laptop. So-
Okay, I understand. I just wanted to make sure that I had an adequate role. So, okay, because you're listed twice. Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
All right.
Denise, did you get out of share?
I'm hoping so. Let me see.
I can't get in it.
Denise,
Yes.
this is Troy Garner. I joined late, just so I want to make sure you saw me on the roll.
I got you, Troy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And ma'am,
Yes,
Hello?
Phyllis.
oh, you hear me. You
Yes.
see me Saturday then. Okay.
Okay,
Thank
yeah.
you.
I mean, the names are there, but like I said, I was trying to make certain about that other person. I had no questions about the others, and I've been keeping up as people come in. So thank
Okay.
you all.
Yeah, because I got to get my laptop fixed. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, this is Karen. I'm gonna go over the scope of service chart, important changes for 2024, tax layer enhancements and reminders. I am now in the 4012. That is our resource guide. That's the book that you want to have on your desk. That's one of the books that you want to have on your desk. 4012. And as you see, going through the 4012, they're going to always have the volunteer standards of conduct. This is what you're going to have to sign that form 13615 to adhere that you are following all 6 of them. So we're going to be talking about the scope. The scope. A lot of times people put the income with the scope, but the income has a limit. The scope is the certification part. That is the part of what you need to certify. Basic, advanced, military, or you take the intake interview on the quality, the volunteer standards of conduct. All those are different certifications. Okay, when you look at the scope, you're either going to be in scope or out of scope. This chart will show you all of the returns and schedules and forms, line by line, schedule by schedule, the ones that are in scope and the ones that are out of scope. When you look at the schedule, when you look at it itself, you'll see that in column 3, which is in scope, yes or no. You look at the scope limitation. And then if it's blank over here up under the certification levels, that will take all certification levels. So you're going to have some that's going to have advanced. You're going to have some that's going to have basic and advanced. And you're going to have some that's going to have military. You're going to have some that's going to have what needs to be done in order to get that process completed. So again, the form 1040 line by line. Up under each one, if it's not in scope, it's going to tell you what's going to make it not in scope. As you can see, each one, you go down to Social Security, all certifications, because it's blank over here on the right. It will not be in scope if it's a foreign Social Security card from Canada or Germany that is treated as U.S. Social Security. it will not be in scope. Go on down the lines, you see capital gains. You have to be advanced in order to work those. You'll see line 12, standard deduction or itemized deduction. You'll have to be advanced to do itemized deduction. We do not see a lot of itemized deductions because of the figure. Each year, which we'll go over in a minute, the figure changes as far as what you have to itemize. Going line by line, you continue to see each line. All these are clear over to the right, so you know that takes any certification. It's going to tell you again what's not in scope. 1040X, not in scope if the original return was out of scope and is not brought into scope by the amendment. And you have to have advanced certification. W2G, certain gambling winnings, not in scope for professional gamblers who use Schedule C. And you will see them because we've had some. They have all their W2Gs stapled together. And they want to file a Schedule C, but cannot do it. Alimony, business income, rental. Now, when you get to the end of the forms, it has the S1, that's Schedule 1. Schedule 1 is additional income and adjustments to income. Okay, so as you see, Schedule 1, up under business income allow, see Schedule C limitations, but it will take advanced certification. Rental income, there will be other income on Schedule 1. Military certification required. Active duty only. Educator expense, this will be some of the adjustments to income because you have additional income and adjustments to income on that Schedule 1. Military certification is required for that. We do see some health savings accounts, advanced certification is required. All this Schedule 1.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Since I'm new to you all site, what does advanced certification mean?
What does what?
Advanced certification mean?
BAS?
Certification.
Where are you?
She said
Like on a
advanced,
lot of these here,
It's advanced.
advanced.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's the test that you take after basic. If you're going to take basic, it's divided up into 5 different certifications.
Okay, that's the certification to do the taxes.
Right. Yes.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, you're going to start off with the voluntary income,
Okay. I
Yeah.
understand now.
okay.
Okay.
We're still on Schedule 1. IRA deductions, you got to be certified in advance. On down, then you get to the Schedule 2. Schedule 2 is additional taxes. So along with your W-2, you're gonna have other income that's gonna require additional taxes. And it goes line by line. And when you get to self-employment tax, that's for those people that file Schedule C. You'll see that they have to take the advanced certification. A lot of this you might not see, but I'm just going down just to show you everything that's on this scope chart. Schedule 3, Schedule 3 is going to be the additional credits and payments. As you can see, it starts off with the foreign tax credit. Education credit, you're gonna have some of that. And not in scope for taxpayers who must repay part or all of an education credit claimed in a prior year. We don't see those. The most of the education credits we see are those people that's in school and college, or those that's going for certain other degrees. Residential energy credit have to be advanced. Then Schedule A, advanced, and this is the part that's not in scope. Schedule B is the same thing, it doesn't have anything over here, so that'll take all certifications. Schedule C, advanced, and these are the ones that you are not in scope. So it's pretty well broken out, schedule form by line by line. Now, for this 982, that'll be those people who have agreed with their credit card company that they're gonna pay so much, or either they didn't pay and they get a 1099-C and we have to fill out this 982. It's not in scope for these issues. But you do have to be certified to advance. And then the 1099-K, these are payment card credit payments. Advanced certification required, military certification required if received for rental income, but it's not in scope for taxable income received for self-employment income, or Form 1099-K received for rental income is in scope of military only. Not in scope for 1099-K received for any other type of taxable income. You might have some beauticians that have been getting paid and they got a 1099-K. And it goes on and on and on, all the way down. And again, it shows you what's in scope and what's not in scope. And it's a pretty easy chart to follow. Any questions? Okay, we're gonna move on to the,
Yeah, I have a question, Miss Faye,
okay.
about professional gamblers. We see some people coming with gambling. How many?
No, we cannot take that sheet that shows their losses. We do not look at that.
Okay,
Is
but
that what you're referring to?
I don't think she's referring to that. I think what Faye is talking about, there are people who come into the site and let's just say they have 10 of those winning statements.
yes, how many do you
And I don't think we've
consider
come up with a number,
professional
Faye.
or
We
not?
ain't come up with a number,
haven't
but
come with a number.
if that's their only income, that's what that's their only income. So I would assume that would be a professional gambler.
So
But
if
most
someone
of the
has,
time it's not.
yeah, but what if he comes with one W-2 and 10 statements? Is he still a professional gambler, or can we do
I
it?
wouldn't think if he had
No.
a W-2
No.
that he would be considered a professional. If he had a W-2, that means he's working. So I
Okay.
wouldn't consider that. What about you, Denise?
I would not. He's just found something that he likes to do. He or she.
Would that be the same like for the Social Security, the SSA form if they had that, and the W-2G, I mean the gambling?
Well, you would have to report that Social Security because that other
Right.
income could
No,
very well be possible. I mean,
yeah,
be
but you're
taxable.
asking if they would be considered a professional gambler.
Right. would that be considered professional or that it wouldn't?
I wouldn't,
No,
Cause they retire, I
No.
mean,
I
I don't
wouldn't
know.
think so. We don't have that many people like that.
Okay, well, we
To
had
even-
some in Arkansas that come through, so that's why I'm asking.
Oh, really?
yeah,
Mhm.
cause you over there, okay, you over there where they-
Yeah,
Mm.
okay.
Yeah, so I do have some, so yeah, they come each
I
year,
would
so.
take it case by case because, you know, each one is gonna be a little different and you should get a feeling of whether, you know, through the conversation,
Mhm,
whether or not,
okay,
you know, whether or not they're professional gamblers.
And I'm gonna throw this in here. I know personally that there are some people who have been used, and what I mean by that, they are recipients of Social Security, and they'll be with a friend or a family member, and that person will ask them to take that money and claim it under their Social Security number, and the person may give them a little stifling or whatever you want to call it, but they really messing themselves up because if they go over the threshold for Social Security, then they got another problem.
and that, yeah, I've run into that too, so, yeah, cause they end up having to pay, yeah. Okay,
I have a question too. I was told when I did doing taxes that, okay, the wins and the losing kind of balance out somewhat.
No, man, we don't even look at that win-loss schedule. We just take the W-2G.
Uh-huh. But
Now, are
doesn't
you
that come
talking
up
about,
on the question?
are you
That-
talking about as far as Schedule A, using the loss up to the
I
income?
think so. Yeah, I hadn't did a gambling in a long time, but I knew it was something about just the wins, the losers and wins.
Well,
It's
they
first
do
that
get,
app.
they do get that paper showing the winnings and the losses.
Okay.
But again, if they are not filing a Schedule A, but their winnings are over the standard deduction, it's
Mhm.
possible that you can use that on Schedule A along with other things that might make them eligible to file Schedule A.
Okay.
We
It's
just have to
very
take
rare
it.
that people itemize and use
Yeah.
Schedule A in 2019 anyway, when they doubled the standard deduction. I think I've worked with one person in that time that's itemized between now and 2019. So that's a pretty rare thing these days.
It is, but I've seen it.
Yeah, but it happens.
It
It
happens.
happens. It's
Yeah.
a case by case
Yeah.
situation.
Yes.
So, professional gambler, I just kind of looked this up real quick. They would want to file a Schedule C so they could
Yes.
deduct expenses against their wins, like gas, travel expenses, home office. Those are the types of things that we wouldn't be able to do. But I
Right.
think, right,
Because they would not be in scope.
that's right. But I
Yeah,
think
'cause
if
we don't
it's
do home
just
office.
they're bringing in their winnings and you're gonna report that on other income, I think we can do that.
That's what we've had a
Okay.
couple of cases like that where the person, all he had was W-2Gs, and that's what we did, what Hunter is saying. If they weren't claiming anything else, they were just claiming the income.
Yes,
Oh,
you,
so
you,
they had a balance too.
you can claim the W-2s if you got 13 of them. That don't mean you're a professional gambler. That means he is one over there and won $5,000.
It got
Right.
good. It got good too.
Right, that was all it is. He's not a
Yeah.
professional gambler. He just like he's retired and he just like to go to the casino.
You would probably know one if you get one.
I had a
Right.
man that had 14 of them. He retired. That's all. That's what he do every day. He goes to the casino.
Yeah.
Right. He win 2,000, 1,000, 500, but that's he do all year. Just go to the casino. He's not a professional gambler. He just wins a little money. And when you do the W-2G, when you fill it out, it's gonna say your losses are equal to your losses are equal to your winnings. The only thing you do is you can't, if you win 5,000, you can't put 7,000 losses on the form. It's
Right.
not gonna go through.
And you're
So the only
right.
thing you do is put his losses equal to the wins. And
You're
9 times out of 10, very few people I have only had a couple of people that rolled over to the
Schedule C.
schedule. No, not the Schedule C. This is just on the itemization where you can
Schedule A.
claim more losses on that right? Because it
Right.
rolled up. I think one lady, she wanted like about $30,000. So, but then you would put that on the Schedule A, right? Instead of, you still would put the, what's called it, but you still would put the losses on with the Schedule A. So it'll work itself out, you know.
Yeah.
So it's no, professional gamblers ain't winning. They ain't professional gamblers with $10,000 for the whole year. He looking at big money. So he ain't doing the casino thing. I just want y'all to have a better idea with the W2Gs. Some people come in with 2, some people come in with 10, some people come in with 4. So it all depends on what you do all year, what your hobby is.
Thank you, James.
All right.
Anything else? Moving right along, we're going to the 2024 important changes. The due date of the return for this year will be April the 15th. That's a Tuesday. 2 days before my birthday. That was a joke. I didn't hear nobody laugh.
I laughed. I was on mute. I
I
laughed.
was on mute too, yes.
Okay. Okay, go on. Can you all see this good enough? Is this big enough?
I can see it, but I can't speak for everybody else.
Yeah.
Okay. The first thing is the Form 1040 includes a checkbox and entry field in the filing status section that allows taxpayers to elect to treat a non-resident alien spouse or dual status alien spouse as a resident. A checkbox was added on line 6C. Taxpayers who elect to use the lump sum election method for their retroactive payment of Social Security benefits will check this box. Schedule 1, which we've looked at a little bit, includes an entry field for taxpayers who had amounts reported on their 1099-K in error or for personal items sold at a loss. I haven't seen neither one of these first two things. The Form W-2 includes a new box 12, code 11 or II for Medicaid waiver payments excluded from income under notice 2014-7. This is something I don't think is new, but they have really had more information on it this year. And this is for those people who take care of their mother, father, whoever is sick in their household, and they get something from the state. They're going to have this new box 12 code this year. Taxpayers will receive Form 1099-K when the reportable proceeds exceeds $5,000. Publication 1244, employees' daily record of tips and reports of tips to employer is obsolete. None of these things will affect us too much. Form 5329, which is the additional taxes. Now, we might see some of this. This is when a taxpayer withdraws money from their 401k and they are younger than 59 and a half, and they get charged a 10% penalty. Well, they've added 2 penalty exceptions. The first one would be domestic abuse victims. And then the second one would be the emergency personal expense distribution. Somebody had an emergency and they had to withdraw monies from their 401ks, or somebody was involved with a domestic abuse. Those are 2 new exceptions that we can put on the in-tax layer. Form 8888, it no longer will allow you to use that to request saving bonds. You can still split the payments, but you can't use the payments for saving bonds. Any questions on any of these? These are the pub changes and the tax form changes. Going to the tax law changes. Again,
Karen.
yes.
So getting my car fixed is not considered an emergency, right?
Not just getting your car fixed.
Okay.
And then again, you know, it's just according to what all happened for you to get your car fixed. You know, why? And that's just like with anything else. You can't just say it like that. It has to have a before and after.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Person exemptions, we haven't been dealing with those unless you're looking at the relative, and that will be, it's going up each year, $5,050. The $300 is still the same for teachers, and that is for the expenses that they paid. Standard deduction each year goes up, and it tells you about how much each year, married, filing, joint. It's going to be $29,200. So anybody that has expenses over $29,200, they can file a Schedule A. But we do not see many of them. In a household, same here. If they have expenses over $21,900, they can file a Schedule A. Single, if they have expenses over $14,600, they can file a Schedule A. Taxpayers who are 65 and older or are blind, they can add this on to their deduction. And each one was, well, this one was increased by $100 and this one by $50. I don't think I've seen a kiddie tax yet. For 2024, the standard deduction amount for an individual who may be claimed as a dependent by another taxpayer cannot exceed the greater of $1,300 or the sum of $450 and the individual's earned income. Standard mileage rate. These are for people who file Schedule Cs, and they use mileage, and the mileage, we have to use the standard mile. If we cannot use actual mileage. The actual deduction would be out of scope. Now, 67 cents a mile, that's really a lot. So it will definitely help the taxpayers who file Schedule Cs. 21 cents a mile for medical, 14 cents a mile for charitable organizations. And again, this 2%, they're saying you can't use it for another year. We know that this year with a new president coming in, they are working on tax bills now, so we don't know what's going to change for 2026. But we know now that some of this is going to change. The qualified business income deduction is used when they file a Schedule C. The retirement savings contribution credit is gone. Let me see. Must not be the adjusted gross income, must not be more than $38,250 for single, married, filing separate, or qualifying surviving spouse. And the modified AGI must not be more than $57,375 and $76,500 for married, filing joint. The earned income credit each year goes up. It's gone up to $632 for people that have no children, and $7,830 for people with 3 or more children. But this is the income that they have to be under in order to get the earned income credit. And each year it goes up. Each year the credit goes up and the income goes up. Taxpayers whose investment income is more than $11,600 cannot claim the EIC. The refundable amount of credit for child tax credit is $1,700. I'm sure that's going to change next year. Student loan interest, it gives you the max. And all of this, it just gives you the max. Each year it changes. the IRA deductions. I really don't see a lot of those. All this information you can find in the 4491. Health savings account, we do have some people that have health savings account. They usually would have that W on their W-2 in box 12. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. On the on the 65 and older, to get the additional, what's up? What if the husband is 65 and the wife is 59? Do they still get the credit for the over 65?
Yeah, if they file a joint return.
If they file a joint, I'm saying, well, both of them have to be over, just one.
No. Whoever it is over.
Oh, okay.
Whoever is over will get it.
Okay, I just wanted to get a clarification.
Yeah, whoever is over.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to the tax layer enhancement. This is the software that we use. Everybody know how I got here, right? Using the Lincoln Learn and typing in Train Pro Web, and then putting your username and password in, then you get to the practice lab, right?
Excuse me, you gonna
What was that again?
Somebody had.
I had missed that Saturday. I'm gonna have to learn, find out how to get there. To the practice lab. Hello?
I'm putting the link in the chat right now.
Okay.
Okay then. Okay, thank you. Damn, the phone man.
When you go to this page and go down to the bottom,
Already open.
you'll see software enhancement. I've already filled this out. And you would go to the attachments. Now, if you want to listen after we go through this later on, tomorrow, or whenever, you can come back to this and it will be a person talking to take you through each screen. Right now, we're just going to go through the document, but this person will show you. And what I'm trying to do is just show you the enhancements.
But we are having a class Saturday, aren't we?
The
site
training-
coordinators.
Yeah, for site coordinators.
Oh, okay, thank you. I got to go see it. Okay.
Okay, so this is, can everybody see this? You want to make it bigger?
I can see it.
Okay. This is for site coordinators. This is when the site coordinators is assigning roles and permissions, and it's just telling you that this year you can go into view and it will show you all the roles and permissions like this. Before it was not like that. Constant, this is again for the site coordinators. When you go into tax layer this year, instead of, it's gonna have message and it's gonna have rejects, but they've added another one, validation errors. That's the change for this year. And you can click on that and see if you have any errors. Message center, that's one of the when you go to tax layer, it's going to show message. You click on that, and it's for people who are trying to send a message to all their users. You can go in there and click message, and then it will show the users, and you can select what users you want to read this message. They keep adding more carry forward information. Beginning in 2024, well, this was 2024, the tax layer automatically advances the cursor to confirm Social Security number box after you type the last digit. Used to be, you would have to tab, you move your cursor over, but now the cursor will automatically go to the next box, which should help. Used to be last year, we used to have to put each one in and tab over or move our cursor over. Well, they've made it so that the cursor will automatically come down to when you are getting ready to type confirm Social Security number. When you're doing the 5695, which is the energy credit form, they're gonna have a part where you have to verify the address. And you can just click on use my main address. There used to be a reject. Also, the EINs will appear when you're getting ready to print a return, and the summary page is gonna have the EINs by the W-2s and the 1099s and all of that, which is a big help for quality review. Married filing joint versus married filing separate comparison. They've made some changes to that where you can go in there and look at it and tell them this is where you would be up under miscellaneous forms. You could tell the person who you are servicing which one would be better, the married filing joint or the married filing separate. People who have a balance due and they might want to figure their estimated tax payments for the next year, they have a calculator now where you can go in there and put some information in, and it will tell you what amount that they would need to pay for 2026. Okay, this one is when you're trying to, if the taxpayer doesn't have a W-2 or 1099-R, you can now create a substitute return for a W-2 or a 1099-R, but it's going to give you a warning at the end of the account to let you know that they would have to paper file this. That's all this is saying. It will show this error, this warning. Okay. Oh, the notes. This year they got a character count on the notes, so you can't make no book out of it. You just type in enough to show what happened on that account. They're giving you a 500 character note space. Form 4972, I don't think we come in contact with that. Insurance premiums. They've included that. Capital gain adjustments. Evidently, a lot of people that file returns had a lot of adjustments. So they've made it where you can input information to a Schedule D without the adjustments versus Schedule D with the adjustments. They've created on the 1099-R where you're doing the simplified method. They've added the age in. Which a lot of this you will not notice until you get into TaxSlayer and come across the specific situation. They're showing the totals on the 1095-A now. Prior year comparison, they've added a year. So it's 22, 23. Added Schedule AI for Form 2210s. I haven't had any contact with the 2210s. Like I said, a lot of this you will see and some of it you won't. These reports are just for mostly the site coordinators, which they've enhanced some of the reports. Any questions on anything? For this federal returns not transmitted at the end of the filing season, toward the end, a lot of times the site coordinators might want to see if there are any more returns out there that hadn't been transmitted, but this report will show them more information than it did before. And a lot of this, you say, you would have to go in and just do it yourself to see what the difference is. Any questions? We haven't had any experience with the customer portal. Any questions?
No.
And again, this is the Link and Learn page. Now, if you go here, we are not there. These are the quality alerts that you would need to get and have at your desk in order for the site coordinators. This is for the site coordinators. These are the quality site requirements. This is what I was talking about, Train Pro Web. And you type in your username. Password. Practice lab. And this is where I was showing you the message center. You can create message. And this is the, if you had people that was already in here, their names would come up and you would click and type the message and where you want to send it. Well, I kind of got stuck.
Got a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Will my login information from last year still be in the system, or would I need to create a new account?
To do what are you trying to do?
Get to the practice lab and stuff like that.
No, you gotta use your email address this year.
Okay, but my information from last year, the
It
previous
should.
year,
I created a new one. So Denise, did you use your same one?
You're gonna have to get another one, Marcus.
okay. All right.
Think I'm set.
Because I kept all that stuff wrote down.
Yeah, I did too, but what good did it do? None.
Well, copy that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. It won't let me back in. Okay, we're moving right along. I was gonna show you some reminders. One of the things that you really need to be conscious of is to put notes in the accounts that you're working on, especially if someone is coming behind you and you want them to know what's going on. I don't know why this is.
Alice, you lit up. Did you have something to say?
No, I apologize.
Not letting me back in for some reason.
I think you need to go out and come back in.
Okay, well, we can stop here and did anyone have any questions? Is it time to take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, that
Yes,
sounds
ma'am.
good.
Yeah, that's good. And we
Okay.
come back. Mm-hmm.
You want to come back at 7:30?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, take a little break and come back at 7:30.
Two things I wanted to bring up before we move on is I went to the practice lab and brought up a print just to show you now this year you're gonna see if Joe Lopez was a dependent for someone, it's gonna have dependent up under here, right here, up under the name. It's gonna show if this person was a dependent, which is something new. And then this is showing the the EIN of the Rosewood School District. That was something else they added on. That's it. Okay. Moving right along. Let me get out of here. Oh. Denise.
Okay. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yes.
14:6. Okay. First of all, let me apologize. I pulled up the wrong book in my previous presentation. For the volunteer roles, it's in the pub 5451. Now for this section, this is in the Pub 5101, which is the one that I was showing you incorrectly. So as we know, for those of us who've viewed the form online and looked at some of the other information, this is a new revised form with a whole lot of pages. It's supposed to be user friendly. So as we go through this, I want you to keep in mind that they're asking that all of the questions be answered just as they have in the past with NA, yes or no. And in the gray shaded areas, we're supposed to make certain that we complete those. I must go down. Okay, over here on this part, you've got notes and comments. And so as a preparer, if there is something that needs to be explained to the quality reviewer, then you need to make your notes over here for that. So now we're going to start off with this form. Of course, as usual, we have the first name, last name, middle initial, last name, date of birth, their title. You see, they've moved the job title up to the front. And then if they're married and they're filing together, and even if they're not filing together, because if they're going to file a married filing separate, we still would need to have their names here, date of birth and their title. Here you've got the mailing address. And then in this next section, you recall that in the previous years, when they asked about the U.S. citizen part, I believe that was on the back page or so of the other form. So they've moved it up with all of the things that we need to look at or they should look at when they're completing this. If they're legally blind, totally and permanently disabled, and then the pen here, and if they're owners or holders of any digital assets. The next area is here. Of course, you know that this has changed from the previous years because they have moved this to the front. And of course, they will check this, and then we will need to have their information so that we can input that into our system. Then here, this is the balance due. As I stated, all of this came from the other pages on the previous years, but they brought it to the front. The next area here is about the written communication from IRS in language other than English. And then they're going to tell you what language, if applicable, and check what applies over here. Here's again about voter registration information that was on the previous page. And then the next one is about the presidential election campaign. Any questions thus far?
Yes. Could you give me an example of what a pronoun first name would look like or sound like?
A who?
It says first name, pronouns optional. What kind of pronoun would be a first name?
All right, Hunter, come on.
I think that just means they can include pronouns if they want to. Like, they'll still write their first name, but if they want to specify their pronouns, they can add that in as well.
Yeah, but what is the pronoun is what he's asking.
Whatever people want it to be, I guess.
I mean, it would have to be on their social security card though, right? Or on their ID?
No, I mean, TaxSlayer is not going to ask for this. This is just something the IRS is doing to try and increase inclusivity to taxpayers. Like, you'll never have to put in their pronouns into TaxSlayer. This is just how they're choosing to identify when they talk to you.
And I think it's just an optional field.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I see it there and
That's like if they want to say she or he or whatever. That's what that means.
Well, I can get behind that, but to have that on a form, then I would think that they want that on their tax return, which can't.
No, that's like I'd say my name is Jack, but my pronoun is she. So when you talk to me, instead of saying he, I want you to say she, because that's what I prefer. That's what it means.
It's optional. It's optional.
It's optional, and then what ends up happening is that as we know, whoever lies awake coming up with all these different forms as they've done this form, to us it don't even make sense. But
Yeah,
to
okay.
somebody it made sense, and they came forward with doing this to create some discussion.
Okay, copy
And
that.
it's to make the person comfortable, because as we know, that's what the person wants to be addressed as, that's what we should do. And I'm just saying, putting it out there.
Okay.
Copy that.
Any other questions before we move forward? Okay, now we're at the marriage status. Of course, the one that causes a lot of conversation is this never married. Some say they never married. Some have been married, and for whatever reason, they still are married on paper, but they have not gotten a divorce. So they walking around, and don't know what to do. So a lot of times they are single, but they didn't put single on here. And we've had many discussions about it. So they still put never married. So some of those people like that still would end up checking, never married, even though they're sort of misleading. Okay, then we have the marriage status. Of course, we all know what that is. If a person chooses, if they are married and they're living together and they choose to file separately for whatever the reasons may be, then of course you know that we have to have their social security number as well as their partner's social security number in order for us to electronically file that tax return. If they do not have that number, then we have to use the 11100-111 number that's in our 4012, and that return would have to be mailed in because it would be rejected with that number on there. For divorced, legally separated, widowed, there are boxes for you to put in the dates for those different statuses. The one that's not listed is head of household, and we know that we have a lot of head of households. So what normally happens for those of us who have been working around a while, we put HOH next to it so that the preparer would know what's going on. And of course, in this next section down here, whoever qualifies them for the head of household status would be listed in this area. Again, this is an area here that causes a lot of talk, because when you speak to a person and they looking at this form and what it says is listed names below of everyone who lived with you last year. Well, you got 6 or 7 people in the household, and you can't claim none of them. And so they list them all here. And when they get to us, we have to verify and make sure that we understand that what they're doing and what they're saying. And a lot of times, some of those names, they end up marking off. Questions? Again,
Yeah.
we're supposed to, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have a question.
Reba? Okay, Reba.
Yes. Did you say that people are checking never married if they're married but filing single because they
Yes.
haven't lived with their spouse?
If it's been a number of years, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So
Yes.
they can check never married even if they're married just because they haven't lived with their spouse.
But that's what a lot of people have been doing. Yes, ma'am. I don't know why they keep holding on, but sometimes it's beneficial in the end, but they keep holding on. It won't divorce, and they'll tell you that.
Okay, so what if they check married and they haven't lived with their spouse and they check that box? Have you lived with your spouse in the last 6 months, and they check no? That would be what they really should be checking, wouldn't it?
That's what I would say. I mean,
Okay.
you're gonna talk to each person and and do what's best for them as well as yourself, because we don't want to file or prepare any false tax returns knowingly.
Okay, well, I was thinking you were saying they should check never married.
Yes.
I misunderstood. Okay.
Okay. And then what you're going to find, Reba, is that there are people that come into your site, and we've had it a lot of times at United Way, where people will come in, that husband and wife come in, and obviously they didn't get their stories together. And so one will sit in one chair, one sit in the other chair, and one will say married. And then they'll say, well, there he is over there. But that person has told the preparer that they single. So they caught, they didn't get their stuff together. So we have to do their married filing separate, unless they
Okay.
choose to file together.
I have a question
Okay.
about the dependents. I'm reading. Can you scroll down a little bit your sheet?
Have we gotten there yet?
Yes, list the names below of everyone.
Okay, that's what we just talked about. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, who lived with you last year, except your spouse. And they say, can you scroll down a little bit, please?
Scroll down a little bit more.
Yeah.
Let's
That's too
go.
much now.
Huh?
That's too far away now.
Yeah, it's not going, if I hit it, it's going to go down. Okay, so this is the whole
And
box right
yes,
here.
that's one. And anyone who you supported but did not live with you last year. Why? Can you claim someone who did not live with you? I don't understand.
You can claim someone who's not living with you. Let's say, for instance, your child is away at school.
Yeah.
That would be one instance. Another instance
Your
would be there are
parent?
people who claim their parents. You know, they're taking care of their parents. They're paying
Okay.
all of the upkeep and everything for their parents.
Okay, understand. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions concerning that? Okay, so we're going to move on to the next section. Okay, the income. Here, you've got the many different types of income that we work with. And of course, for the wages, you should have a W-2 or many W-2s. And I know that in the past, we've gotten into a discussion about a hard copy. And we're not trying to tell anyone how to work their sites. You know, each site, we have not come up with uniformity. So there are some sites that if the person has a W-2 on their phone, I don't use it. They need to go somewhere and have it printed off. But there are other sites that have blank W-2s and they allow that person to sit there and fill it out. And so if that's what works for you and your site, I'm not discouraging it. I'm just saying that I don't do it. And for the most part, they ask that we have a hard copy W-2. Okay, as Karen has went over some of the other things, it's showing you what the levels are for preparation of these returns, which of course we know the B is for basic, and you know each of the other things here, the B and the A. So then the next thing we have is the tips, and they can be basic or advanced. A lot of times for some of the tips, they're reported on the W-2, so you will see that. The retirement income, you're gonna ask for a 1099-R, or they should have a 1099-R. And we're going to put everything that's on that form in the system. You have disability benefits such as from insurance, workman's compensation, again, the 1099-R or the W-2. You got Social Security or railroad retirement benefits. And for the railroad retirement, of course, you'd have an RRB-1099. The unemployment benefits, that's a 1099-G. You got the refund of state local income tax. You have the interest or the dividends, which would be a 1099 INT or 1099 DIV. Then you've got the stocks, which would be a 1099B. And then you have the capital loss carryover. Okay, then here you've got the alimony. And they have, you answer these questions. The preparer answers these questions, yes, no. But like I said at the beginning, you must have an NA or yes, no to all of these questions as you go through. You got income from renting out your house or a room in your house, and it tells you what you need to do. Income from renting personal property, such as a vehicle. We've discussed this gambling winnings. So you're gonna have a W-2G or many of those. Then you've got payments for contract or self-employment work. And then they answer these questions. And you as the preparer, put a N or a no against whichever one is applicable for that situation. The last one on this page is any other money received during the year. And those examples would be cash payments, jury duty, awards, digital assets, royalties, union strike, and many other items that are listed in our 4012. Any questions before we proceed to the next page? Okay.
Denise,
Yes, ma'am.
this Joanne, on
I know.
the alimony,
Mhm.
how would we know, what kind of form would they present to us if they were paying alimony? Do you know?
Okay, what I've had a couple of people who come back yearly, and they have their document from court. Some have a document from court, some have their bank statements where the money has gone into the bank account. So I don't think it's any set weight. They just sort of keep up with it themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. This is Avis.
Okay, Avis.
On that part where it says payments for contract and self-employment work, wouldn't that be like the Uber and they would check that box 1099K like Uber or Lyft or anything like that? Or
That's correct. So that's why I stated whichever one is applicable. Yes, ma'am. A lot of times for the Uber and the Lyft and some of the others, I've found that what happens with those companies is that they send to them by way of email.
Okay.
How many trips they had, what the expenses were, all of that. So they would have something from those companies that could help us to do what we need to do in the way of preparing that tax return.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Denise,
Yes, Karen.
there was a question in the chat. It says,
Okay.
so what if the child is staying with the parent but is working? Can the parent claim the child as a dependent as well as the child filing their own taxes? And
Okay.
someone says depends on tests like the age test and the income test for the child. If the child passes the dependency test, the parent may claim them. If the child's income is above the filing requirement amount, they need to file whether they are claimed as a dependent or not. A lot of the intake form questions are presented pretty broadly, and we have to get into the details in the actual interview to get the information we need. So again, it's according to how much money that child made and if they stayed with the parent all year, and it just depends on the dependency test.
And the other thing I want to add here is that some of the children who are still at home, living under their parents' roof, they're in a hurry to go out and get a refund instead of discussing it with their parents. And so what I have done, or we have done at our location a lot of times, is once we see how old they are, how much money they made, and a lot of times it's not going to make a difference about the refund one way or the other, then I'll ask them sometimes to get the parent on the phone because they haven't discussed it. Because if we don't dig into that, as Karen has said, then what happens later is that, first of all, the child files the tax return, get their refund. The parent come in to file their tax return, claiming that child, and the return rejects. Why? Because that child claimed their own self. And so to correct that, then what ends up happening is that they've got to file an amended return and make those corrections, and that is a long process. As far as the taxpayer is concerned, it's a long process.
Can I jump in real quick on that?
You may.
If that child files a tax return, when you're filling out his 1040 or whatever, isn't there a box on there if can your parent claim you as a dependent or something like that?
You are correct. And we asked them that and it doesn't, what, they say, oh no, I'm claiming myself.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why I say you talk to them, you ask them questions, but a lot of times they'll tell you no. Look you right in the face, tell you no.
Yeah, because if they still living
And
at
then
home.
sometimes they'll say, I don't.
Okay.
So that's one reason why you have to have a discussion with them, and we make comments on our 13614C to let that other person know when they're quality reviewing.
Okay.
We try to stop them, but a lot of times, like I said, people are looking at that bottom line and they're not thinking that thing through. I mean, after all, you living with your parents, they paying all of the necessary living expenses. You just there. You may be buying yourself a few clothes or something, or
Right.
buying you what you want to eat, which is not what your mom and everybody else is eating, that kind of thing. So you just have to weigh it out.
Thank you.
That
Any other
also
questions?
happens with the education credit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we've got expenses and tax related events. And we've talked about people itemizing, and we don't see a whole lot of that anymore. But if there's somebody whose itemization amounts is greater than the standard deduction, then that would include the mortgage interest, the taxes, state, local real estate sales, the medical, dental, prescription expenses, charitable contributions, and of course, over to the right of that, you're going to check the box that it is associated with those deductions. Paid any of these expenses in 2024, which Karen just stated about the student loan interest. If the child is claiming themselves, then that student, excuse me, that's the wrong one. Anyway, this is student loan interest right here. And that will be a 1098E. The child and dependent care, they're going to bring you a form with the place that is they're paying that to, with the identification number and the address and all of that, and the money amount, so that you can complete the 2441 in the software. Contributions to a retirement account, they should have those forms to show you. The school supplies by teacher, teacher's aide, or other educator, that amount is $300. The alimony payments, here it tells you do not include the child support. Of course, we know that that's two different things. Then they ask you, did any of the following happen during 2024? And this is the one about the school. And of course, here, as we were speaking about the children before, when children come in and they got that 1098T form, then that form follows where they're being claimed. So if they claim themselves, then we would end up using that 1098T if it's going to be conducive for them. If the parent is claiming them, then the 1098T goes on the tax return, that credit goes on the tax return for or with the parent. Sale of a home, have a health savings account. Of course, they will have the forms necessary for you to fill out the 8889 form. Purchase health insurance through the marketplace. We touched on that. I touched on that earlier about the 1095A. And of course, you have to break it down to them, let them know we're talking about the Obamacare or the marketplace. The next thing is to purchase and install energy efficient home items. And here the example is windows, furnace, and installation. And so what I want to say about this particular one is that for the energy credit, this is a 5695 form. And this year, part 1 is out of scope. Part 2 is in scope. Your reference is the 4012, page G20. Do I have any questions about that? Okay, the next one is have credit card, mortgage, or other debt cancellation forgiven by a lender, and they would have the 1099-C. And the next one is have a loss related to a declared federal disaster area. This is also out of scope this year. The next one is have a tax credit disallowed, which is the earned income credit, child tax credit, or American Opportunity Credit. Of course, we need to ask them what year was it disallowed, if they tell us, or because they'd be like, oh, it didn't happen to me. And the reason why. We have received any letter or bill from the IRS. So we ask them that, or they, if they don't check it, we have to ask them about it. And make estimated tax payments or apply last year's refund to the 2024 taxes. Most people who pay estimated tax payments, they have their documentation with them. And so we get that and we put the amounts here so that it can be put in the software when it's time to prepare that tax return. Any questions?
I have a
Come on,
question.
James.
You said about about a young person claiming the educational credit.
Yes.
I thought if you was under the age of 24 and your income was less than 50% of the earned income credit, you couldn't claim. Well, really, under the age of 24, you can't claim the education credit for yourself.
Right, but there are some people who are over that age and they have their credit.
No, I'm not talking about over. I said under.
Yeah, under. Right, you're
So
right.
most of them, you didn't say under. You said if they come in, they can claim their credit follows them, but it don't.
Right.
They have to be over the age of 24 to claim their credit. Right.
Correct. Otherwise, they don't get anything.
Right. So they have basically the parent can claim them, then the parent claims the credit.
Correct.
Yeah. That was I just wanted to be clear on that. I thought maybe something had changed.
Not yet. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so the optional information here, which we've seen before when it's asking them to answer these questions about carrying on a conversation in English, reading in English, the disabilities, and are you a spouse or veteran of the United States, of the U.S. Armed Force? So they check whichever one is applicable to them, and then you have the race where they would check what is applicable to them so that we can put it in the software. And the spouse's information as well. Any questions? Okay, back here, we have this space that has been provided, and a lot of us use this space for the client to write down their social security number sometimes for the person that they're claiming. And for the banking information, because in order for them to get their refund and they want it deposited into their account, we need to have the routing and the account number. So some of the people, especially those who've been constantly coming back, when you get the form, they've written a lot of this stuff on in another area, and so now this is the area where they have a lot of lines to write whatever it is that they want to write. Any questions? Okay, and then this is the consent form here that we've been having. Of course, when they sign the consent, then the information is in the system when we go and pull up the social security number for that person on the next year. And once that happens, then of course, we're able to toggle through making any changes if we need to. But then there's sometimes people won't sign this form. But that does not preclude us from preparing a tax return for them. Are there any questions about the 13614C? Going once, going twice. Gone. Okay, Karen, I'm finna stop sharing. You or Hunter, one of y'all up. Karen,
It's Hunter.
Are we ready to go into credits? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I got you. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. All right. And everyone see that? Make it a little bigger.
Yes, I can see it.
You.
yes, we can.
Oh, too big, too big. All right. So we're going to talk about credits. Main thing that y'all are already aware of is the difference between a refundable and a non-refundable credit. The easiest way I describe it to people is a refundable credit has the capacity to become cash in your wallet, whereas a non-refundable credit can only go to zero. It can only reduce tax liability. It never turns into actual money that you get out of your refund. Or a refundable credit go beyond that zero liability and be money that you receive. So we're going to start talking about credits, beginning with the credit for child and dependent care expenses. So this is a non-refundable credit. It is essentially for people who are working and they need to pay for some kind of child or dependent care while they're either working or while they're looking for work. The qualifying who can be claimed for this credit, a qualifying child under the age of 13. So that's different where a lot of the times the IRS will say, 13 or over, or like, give you a date or something. Whereas this one, is 12 and under. So they have to be under 13 to qualify for this. It can also be a spouse or another dependent who is incapable of self-care, someone who they, need to bring in someone to provide the care for them. The credit ranges from 20% to 35% of the taxpayer's expenses. And to determine whether a taxpayer is eligible for this credit, there are a series of tests here that we can do, mainly just to see if the person that is receiving the care, are they a qualifying person? So again, a qualifying child under the age of 13, or someone, a dependent or a spouse who was incapable of self-care and that they had to provide that care for through someone else. The earned income test, so to be eligible for this credit, both the taxpayer and the spouse, if married filing jointly, must have earned income throughout the year. That can be any kind of regular income like wages or salaries. One thing to note is if the spouse is a full-time student, then that can substitute as having that earned income if they were a full-time student, so that being more than 5 calendar months during the year. And there's some information here on if you want to calculate that, like if they were a full-time student for certain months of the year, how much would that qualify as income for the months that they were a full-time student? So just know, the both parents, if they're filing jointly, need to be working to be eligible for this credit or need to be receiving income. But if they're a full-time student or they're unable to care for themselves, there are exceptions to that rule. So the care expenses must be work-related expenses. So that means they can only receive this credit if they, paid for dependent care, uh, either to work or to look for work. And they also, the expenses are for a qualifying person's care and to provide for that person's well-being and protection. So really, we see this the most for like daycare. If like one parent or both parents are working and they didn't have anyone to watch the kid, they need to send them to daycare or after school care. That's a good example of when we might see this. One thing to note is that the following expenses are not considered to be work related. So cost of care outside the home for dependents under age 13, for example, preschool or home daycare, or before school or after school care for a child in kindergarten or a higher grade. So like regular school like does not count. The cost of care for any other qualifying person, for example, dependent care. Um, Yeah, sorry, I got a little turned around there. Yeah, these are examples of work-related expenses. So things like after-school care, before-school care, the cost of care for any other qualifying person, household expenses that are paid at least partly for the well-being and protection of a qualifying person. For example, the services of a housekeeper or cook. Expenses that do not qualify as work-related are things like education expenses to attend kindergarten or a higher grade. So yeah, like what we consider, I guess, regular school does not count for this credit. The cost of sending a child to an overnight camp. So if it's overnight, like a summer camp, that does not count for this, nor does the cost of transportation not provided by a care provider. We don't really see household employees a lot. One thing you might see is if a taxpayer is making payments to a relative, they can do that as long as they don't claim that relative as a dependent. You can't have one dependent take care of another dependent and be eligible for credit. It can be a relative, but not if that relative is being claimed as a dependent. The provider of the care will need to provide an employer identification number. So a lot of the times when we see this, the taxpayer will bring in kind of like a receipt or some paperwork from the daycare provider, and it'll have that on there. I have had on occasion had to call the daycare provider directly to get their EIN because we will need that, putting it into TaxSlayer for the taxpayer to receive that credit. Yeah, like I said, the credit should be, I think, up to 25 to 30% of the expenses. Taxpayers' expenses are subject to an earned income limit. The amount of work-related expenses used to figure the credit cannot be more than taxpayer's earned income for the year, or if married filing jointly, the smaller of the taxpayer or spouse's earned income for the year. So, in summary, the credit for child dependent care expenses is a non-refundable credit that allows taxpayers to reduce their tax liability by a portion of the expenses. The maximum expense amounts are $3,000 for one qualifying child, $6,000 for two or more qualifying persons. The $6,000 limit does not need to be divided equally among them. So if they're paying, $200 for one kid to attend daycare for just a little while, and then $5,000 for another one, they can still receive, that $5,200, even if it's not split evenly among the children. The maximum credit rate is 35% of the taxpayer's expenses, and a taxpayer must satisfy the 5 eligibility tests to qualify the credit, those being qualifying person, earned income, work-related expense, the joint return, and the provider identification test. All right. So education credits, there are really two big ones that you're going to see for people who come in with 1098-Ts who have tuition statements and things like that. So education credits are the amount that are can't speak today. My apologies. Education credits are amounts that will reduce the amount of tax due. The amounts based on qualified education expenses the taxpayer paid during the year. This is largely tuition, and that'll be reflected on the Form 1098-T, but it can also be a couple other things. There are two main education credits that they might be eligible for: the American Opportunity Credit and the Lifetime Learning Credit. The American Opportunity Credit allows 40% of the credit to be refundable, and there are certain rules that we have to check to see if they're eligible for the American Opportunity Credit. The main one being you can only claim the American Opportunity Credit for the first 4 years of your higher education. After that, you would be receiving the Lifetime Learning Credit. There are other eligibility rules for the American Opportunity Credit, like you cannot have a felony drug charge, and I believe you have to be a full-time student for that one. Taxpayers can take the education credits for themselves, their spouse, and/or their dependents who are enrolled or attended an eligible post-secondary educational institution during the tax year. The law requires that students must generally receive a Form 1098-T in order for the taxpayer to claim the education credit. However, if the educational institution is not required to furnish a Form 1098-T, the taxpayer may claim a credit if the student does not receive that form. The student is required to provide the information that would otherwise be included on the Form 1098-T, but most of the time they're going to have a 1098-T. We're going to put that into the tax layer, and it's going to go ahead and prompt you to fill out the stuff to give them one of these two credits. The basic requirements for an education credit are they cannot be, to claim an education credit, verify that the following are true for the taxpayers. They cannot be claimed as a dependent on someone else's return. They're not filing as married filing separately, and their adjusted gross income is below the limitations for their filing status. Also, make sure they were not non-resident aliens for any part of the tax year, or if they were, they elect to be treated as resident aliens. An eligible institution for the education credits are generally any accredited public, nonprofit, private school, university. If they come in with a 1098-T and it's like, legitimate school, most of those are eligible for education credits. Qualified expenses that they can use, that the credit can be used for, are things like tuition, certain related expenses required for enrollment or attendance at an eligible institution. They can include non-academic fees, such as student activity fees, athletic fees, or other expenses unrelated to the academic course of institution that must be paid to the institution as a condition of enrollment or attendance. That's kind of a big qualifier. Like, is this something that the university required for enrollment or for attendance? However, the American Opportunity Credit, the definition for certain related expenses is different from the Lifetime Learning Credit, and we'll talk about that more here in a minute. There are certain things that we might see a lot that do not qualify. The main ones that do not qualify are room and board, insurance, medical expenses like student health fees, transportation costs, or other similar personal living or family expenses, or any course of instruction or other education involving sports, games, or hobbies, unless it's part of the student's degree program, or for the Lifetime Learning Credit, it helps the student to acquire or improve job skills. One other expense that we'll see a lot that does qualify for this are books. We get books a lot, and books, if they have like a receipt for the bookstore, then the books can count towards this credit as well. For if they're already eligible for the credit, books can be a qualified expense. When we're calculating that, just a reminder that there are amounts that need to be excluded from those qualifying expenses. So if they've received a scholarship, we want to deduct that scholarship amount from their expense total, and then the remainder of that would be the qualifying expenses for the credit. So the American Opportunity Tax Credit and the Lifetime Learning Tax Credit are different. Mainly that the Lifetime Learning Tax Credit is non-refundable, whereas I think 40% or a portion of the American Opportunity Tax Credit can be refundable. So essentially, the American Opportunity Tax Credit is typically the better credit if they're eligible for it. So essentially, when TaxSlayer will ask you questions when you're inputting a 1098-T, it's trying to determine which of these they're eligible for. If they're eligible for both, it should default to the American Opportunity Tax Credit because that usually is a more advantageous credit to receive. But if not, the rules for the Lifetime Learning Credit are a little more relaxed, and there more people might be eligible for that. So it should automatically default to the Lifetime Learning Credit if they're not eligible for the American Opportunity Tax Credit. So it'll ask you, have they completed the first 4 years of post-secondary education? And if they have, if they've already completed the first 4 years and they are not eligible for the American Opportunity Credit, you're only eligible for that for those first 4 years of post-secondary education. It'll ask if they've been claimed before. It'll ask, are they enrolled in a program that leads to a degree, certificate, or other credential? This is a requirement for the American Opportunity Credit. Were they taking at least 1/2 the normal full-time workload for the course of study? So were they a full-time student? They need to be a full-time student to be eligible for this. Have they ever been convicted of a felony for possession or distribution of a controlled substance? And if they have, they are ineligible for this. And do they have a taxpayer identification? The American Opportunity Credit can be up to $2,500 per eligible student, depending on the amount of eligible expenses and the amount of tax on the return. The credit is 100% for the first 2,000 in eligible expenses and 25% of the second 2,000 in eligible expenses per student, up to the amount of tax. 40% of the credit is a refundable credit, which means taxpayer can receive up to $1,000 even if no taxes are owed. So even if it doesn't look like they're going to owe anything, if they have a 1098-T and you think they might be eligible for this, it is worth talking to them about to find out. Taxpayers under age 24 cannot claim the refundable portion of the credit if certain conditions are met. The lifetime learning credit can be taken if the taxpayer and the expenses meet the requirements described. Under what basic requirements must the taxpayer meet? So if it just meets those basic criteria, then they are probably eligible for the lifetime learning credit. If they are not eligible for the American Opportunity Credit, for example, students don't necessarily need to be pursuing a program leading to a degree or other recognized education credential to be eligible for the lifetime learning credit. If they are taking classes to improve a job skill or something like that, they would be eligible. They don't need to be working towards a degree necessarily. Felony drug convictions do not make taxpayers ineligible for the lifetime learning credit. For the lifetime learning credit, up to $2,000 non-refundable per return, 20% of up to $10,000 in eligible expenses. There's no 4-year limit on the lifetime learning credit, so they can take this for as long as they're having education expenses and are eligible for this. They're not cut off after those 4 years. And again, course-related book supplies, fees, and equipment are included in qualified education expenses only if they must be paid to the institution as a condition of enrollment or attendance. So again, the big question is like, was this an optional expense, or is this something that they were required to do to take this class or to attend this university? And it talks about determining the amount of the credit. Fortunately, TaxSlayer does a lot of that for us, but we just want to make sure that we are checking for all the potentially qualifying educational expenses, as well as checking for things like scholarships or anything that we might need to deduct before we calculate that qualified expense amount. Because, if they are receiving scholarships, we want to make sure that we take those out, because the credit amount would be reduced by the amount of the scholarship. So in conclusion, there are 2 education credits that might reduce a taxpayer's tax: the American Opportunity Credit and the Lifetime Learning Credit. The requirements for the credits are that taxpayers and students must have a taxpayer identification number by the due date of the return, including extensions to claim the American Opportunity Credit. A taxpayer who claims the American Opportunity Credit and is not eligible can be banned up to 10 years for claiming the credit. So that's another reason we want to be really sure that we're checking between those 2 credits, because we don't want anyone to be disallowed from claiming the American Opportunity Credit. 40% of the American Opportunity Credit is refundable up to $1,000. Taxpayers can claim the American Opportunity Credit for up to 4 years. The Lifetime Learning Credit can be claimed for an unlimited number of years. It is a non-refundable credit up to $2,000, 20% of up to $10,000 in expenses. Education expenses can be applied to those credits or deducted as business expenses on Schedule C if they qualify. That's not something we typically see. Most of the time, the education expenses are going to be pertaining to the education credits and a 1098-T. Some situations that are out of scope: taxpayers who must repay part or all of an education credit claimed in a prior year, or taxpayers who are subject to the kiddie tax on their taxable scholarship or grant. So if you come across anything like that and it doesn't sound familiar, then know that it is out of scope for VITA and we'll need to refer them somewhere else. All right. I think I'm going to pass it off. Karen or Denise, whoever's next.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Let's take a 5-minute break.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna quickly go through the child tax credit and the earned income credit. The thing that you need to know about the child tax credit is that they have to be under 17. Usually when I'm completing a tax return and I see that that child is 16, I tell that taxpayer that, ma'am or sir, this is the last year you can claim the child tax credit. So they won't be looking for that the next year. And they'll know what they need to do in order to make up for that credit, one way or the other. They must be a U.S. citizen. They must be claimed as your dependent. They didn't provide over half of their own support. They live with the taxpayer over 6 months, and they must have a Social Security number. That's basically it. The computer will figure the child tax credit, and that goes against your tax. Now, you do have the additional child tax credit, and that is a person can still get another $1,700 per child if they had at least $2,500 of taxable earned income. And that's basically it. Any questions on that? Any questions? None? Okay, we go to the earned income credit. Now, the only other thing about the child tax credit is if they're 17 or older, they can get that $500 credit. Okay, moving on to the earned income credit. This is the earned income that they must have, and this is the income that's not excluded. I know at one time people thought that unemployment would get them earned income credit, but it is not earned income. So as long as you know what's earned and what's unearned, you'll know right away if they are eligible for it. Some of the errors is that they claim a child who doesn't meet the residency and relationship requirements. Married taxpayers incorrectly found as a single or head of household, incorrectly reporting income, particularly income and expenses from self-employment. Some of those petitions try to come in and don't have anything written down or bothers. Incorrect Social Security numbers, or not claiming a qualifying child because the child is not a dependent. Example, a full-time student under age 24 who supported themselves, or a disabled family member whose income covers half of their support. Support is not a test for earned income credit. Any questions? Payments and refunds, the only thing about that is if they're gonna get a direct deposit, you know to get the routing number and account number. If they're gonna be a balance due person, you still, if they're gonna pay a debit, you get that routing number and account number. Any questions on any of that? The earned income credit is figured by the computer. As long as you put the right information in, it will figure the earned income credit for you. Okay, that's it for me.
Back on you, Hunter.
Gotcha. All right. So just going back to taxpayer requirements, a picture ID is needed for taxpayers, and if they're married filing jointly, we need it for the spouse as well. Just know that, that's just a rule that we have to work with. And then again, just to reiterate that we need social security cards for all dependents on a return and the taxpayer and the spouse if they're married filing jointly. So, 1 to 2 photo IDs and then a social security card or an I-10 for anyone whose name is appearing on the return, essentially. Taxpayers must provide original copies, or if they have a form SSA 1099, that can count as a social security card requirement. We can take that if they have an SSA 1099 because that'll have their name and their social security number on it as it's sent directly from the Social Security Administration. And if they have an I-10, that'll also suffice as a social security card. If they have an I-10 notice, that means that they're not eligible to receive a social security card. So if they have an I-10, that's individual taxpayer identification number, that will also suffice. Just know in terms of resource documents, we'll see a lot of W-2s, a lot of 1099s, 1098s, just anything that you receive that looks like that, make sure we keep account of that when we're working with the taxpayer and going through the interview. Even if, say, they haven't checked one on their yellow form or their intake form, if you see a form that looks like an IRS form, make sure we're getting a look at that and putting it on the return if we think it belongs. Most of what you'll see, though, are going to be those W-2s and those 1099s. Some specific things you might want to look out for are a 1095A. That is the ACA, so that's the Obamacare form. And the 1095A is an important one because if they have a 1095A, first of all, having a 1095A makes you have a filing requirement. Even if your income is below the filing requirement level, if you receive a 1095A, then you have a filing requirement. And second, if you have received a 1095A or if you were issued a 1095A and it's not included in the return, that return will get rejected. We try to file it electronically. So it's really important to ask because a lot of people might not be familiar with a 1095A or, they might not even mark it on their intake form, but just having that conversation like, were you enrolled in healthcare? Was it through the marketplace? Have you ever been on Obamacare? And if they'd say, oh yeah, that sounds familiar, then, diving more into that, because a lot of people might be on it but not realize that that's what it is and not know that they need to have that 1095A. And that's one of the biggest reasons why our electronic returns get rejected, or people that just, didn't make us aware that they were issued a 1095A. They might not have been aware themselves, and we get it bounced back to us from the IRS saying this was rejected because it needs a 1095A. This taxpayer was on a marketplace plan. So then we have to follow back up and call them, and it becomes a back and forth game. So really, if they're not immediately like, no, I had health care through my employer or something like that, ask some questions, see if they might have been on a marketplace plan. And if so, let them know, well, can't file this today if you think you might have received a 1095A, we're going to need that form. They can always call the marketplace to check or to have that information given out over the phone, or if they can log in and have it, access it digitally. The marketplace people are honestly super helpful. And once the taxpayer verifies that they're working with a VITA volunteer and they give us permission to talk on their behalf, the marketplace people can give us that information over the phone. So that's a great number to have. If you don't have it, that number is 1-800-318-2596. That's 1-800-318-2596. So that's a great tool to have, especially if you have someone who doesn't know if they're on a marketplace plan or not. We can always call to confirm and find out more information. One other thing to look for are, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Could you give that number again? I missed the last part.
Yeah, no problem. It's 1-800-318-2596.
Oh, Mr. 259. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. One other thing to look out for are IRS issued identity theft protection numbers. It's an IP pin essentially. They'll mark on the intake form whether they've received that or not. Again, some people might not be aware of it, so it's important to ask these questions like, have you ever had your identity stolen in the past? Have you ever had any issues with identity theft in the IRS? Because if they were issued an IP pin, that's another reason why our electronic files will get rejected. If they have an IP pin that isn't on the return or it's an outdated one, then they'll get rejected. We can paper file it, but ideally we want to file those electronically just so it goes through as quickly as we can and the taxpayers can get their refund as quickly as they can.
I wish yes, yeah.
Was there a question? So yeah, we want to make sure we're asking those questions, especially if, you know, they left that blank and they're not really sure what an IP pin is, because if they had one issued to them, then we're going to need it to put on the return. And the last thing in terms of requirements, you know, we've already talked a little bit about ride shares like Uber, Lyft, Grubhub, and how we are going to calculate those income and expenses, whether that be on a Schedule K and then pulling that to a Schedule C for business income. One thing I'll say though is, you know, encourage your taxpayers to go ahead and have all of their, you know, totals ready for you by the time they come to do their return. You know, it's not a great use of our time to be sitting up there adding all their income and expenses and calculating all that for a Schedule C or for their ride share while they're there. Ideally, they should have that already taken care of and have the forms ready to present to you saying, this is my total income, here's my total expenses. You know, if they're doing it with Uber or Lyft, I think they can print out and say, here's my mileage, here's my commuter mileage, here's my business mileage. They should have all that ready. It's not our job to be doing all that for them. They should be able to just bring us those totals and we put that on the return. So, you know, if you see that a lot, be encouraging your tax. Go ahead.
I was gonna say at Southland, we don't do that. We give them a Schedule C, or we tell them what we need them to do and let them do it.
Right.
Correct.
Exactly. Yeah, there are different ways we can approach this, but you know, the main thing is making sure that we're not spending our time doing all that calculation because that's really on them. You know, they need to, whether they make their own Schedule C or whether they have it printed off directly from Uber or Lyft, they should be bringing us, you know, those total amounts that we just put on a Schedule C or that we just put in the tax layer. So those are really the only things I wanted to touch on, and now we can talk about volunteer tools and resources.
Okay, for the volunteer tools and resources, we've already really talked about most of them because all you're gonna do is irs.gov and Site Coordinator Corner, and it will have all of those pubs that you need to have at your, you know, that you need to go through. But just remember that you need the 4012, the pub 17, the 4299, and the IRS alerts. Those are the 4 things that basically you should have on your desk or online. So now we can go to the test.
All right. Hold up. So we'll go through the 3 tests you'll need to take. Again, site coordinators, you'll have another one, but we'll cover that in the site coordinator training. So given that we've only got 20 minutes left, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. But I encourage all of y'all not to just, you know, don't just write down the answers here and then go plug those in. You know, it's really important that you understand the material before you get out and, you know, are working with the taxpayers. The worst situation would be for, you know, just to plug in the answers and not really be familiar with this material. And then you're working with, you know, doing actual tax returns and, you know, not knowing the material. So while I'm going to go through this really quickly, I do encourage all of y'all to take the test on your own. You can use this kind of as a reference, as a guide. But you know, it really is beneficial to take the test because it's always good to brush up on stuff. I missed 2 questions out of 35 when I was doing the advanced, and it's stuff I just hadn't seen in the field in years and years. So it's always good to kind of brush up on it and just remember things. That didn't take me where I wanted to go. All right, here we go. Volunteer standards of conduct. All right, so volunteer standards of conduct is just 10 questions. So prior to working at a VITA TCE site, all VITA TCE volunteers, including greeters, client facilitators, tax preparers, and quality reviewers, must, anybody want to shout out the answer?
Annually pass the volunteer standards of conduct certification test with a score of 80% or higher, and sign and date the form 13615 volunteer standards of conduct agreement agreeing to comply with the VSC by upholding the highest ethical standards.
The answer is both A and B.
That's correct. The answer is E, both A and B. This one can be a little tricky because you would think they would need to pass the advanced law certification, but it specifies like breeders do not have to pass advanced law. Number 2, can a volunteer be removed and barred from the VITA TCE program for violating the volunteer standards of conduct? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes is correct. If a taxpayer offers you a $20 bill because they were so happy about the quality service they received, what is the appropriate action to take?
C.
What's that?
C.
C.
C is the correct answer. We want to thank the taxpayer, but we cannot accept any payment for our services. Sometimes I wish we could, but we cannot do that. Number 4, Jake is an IRS tax law certified volunteer preparer at a VITA site. Preparing a return for Jill, Jake learns that Jill does not have a bank account to receive a direct deposit of a refund. Jill is distraught when Jake tells her that the paper refund check will take 3 to 4 weeks longer than a refund being direct deposited. Jill asks Jake if he can deposit her refund in his bank account and then turn the money over to her when he gets it. What should Jake do?
B.
B.
B is correct. Jake should explain to the taxpayer that refund cannot be deposited into a volunteer's bank account, and she'll have to open her own account in her own name to have it deposited. Number 5, Max prepares a tax return for Ollie at VITA site. He finds out during the interview that Ollie has no health insurance. After Ollie leaves the site, Max writes her name, contact information down to take home to his wife, who sells health insurance for profit. Which of the following statements is true?
B.
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 He is correct. He's violated the standards of conduct for their own personal gain. Bob, an IRS tax law certified volunteer preparer, told the taxpayer that cash income does not need to be reported because the IRS does not know about it. Bob indicated no cash on the intake form. Bob prepared a tax return excluding the cash income. Jim, the designated quality reviewer, was unaware of the conversation and therefore unaware of the cash income, and the return was printed, signed, and e-filed. Who violated the volunteer standards of conduct?
A.
Bob.
A. Bob did it. Bob was the one, like Jim didn't know, so it was on Bob because he intentionally misheld information. Sue, a VITA coordinator, was watching the news when she saw Aaron, a tax law certified volunteer, and a story about several bank employees being arrested for suspicion of embezzlement. She saw Aaron being led out of the bank in handcuffs. 3 days later, Sue is shocked when she sees Aaron show up at the site ready to volunteer, apparently out on bond. She pulls Aaron aside and explains that his arrest on suspicion of embezzlement could have a negative effect on the site, and therefore she must ask him to leave. Sue removed the tax. It is A. Sue took appropriate action. That's a bad look. That is a violation of standards of conduct. If you are, on bond from embezzlement, we can't have you volunteering. Sam's assigned a taxpayer's return. The taxpayer's been waiting a long time because of the volume of taxpayers, and he's agitated when they sit with Sam. How should Sam interact with the taxpayer?
All of the above. D.
D. All of the above. Calm, peaceful, professional, and courteous. VITA sites and volunteers must not solicit business from taxpayers or use taxpayer information for personal or business benefit. That is going to be
A.
true. Yep, that's correct.
A.
And lastly, Ben is preparing a tax return and the taxpayer has a dependent listed. The dependent is the child of the taxpayer's cousin. The child lived with the taxpayer for a few months. Ben prepared the return and indicated on the intake form that the child lived with the taxpayer all year. Did Ben violate the standards of conduct?
Yes.
Yes. B.
Yes. Yep. Living with the taxpayer for a few months is not the same as living with the taxpayer the whole year, so he prepared the return with false information. All right, good deal. That's the volunteer standards of conduct. Let's get to the intake exam. All right, all IRS certified volunteer preparers participating in VITA must use the form 13614C or NR along with a thorough interview for every return prepared at the site.
True.
That's true. We always have to use the yellow form. Number 2, what must a certified volunteer preparer do with the intake form before starting a return?
D.
D is correct.
D.
We have to do all these things. Number 3, the basic certification level is required to prepare a return with unreported tip income.
B.
False.
B, it is false. Unreported tips are an advanced topic. Number 4, a date must be entered in the form 13614C page 1 to determine the appropriate filing status for taxpayers who are.
All of the above.
All of the above is correct. VITA volunteers use Pub 4299 to determine if a return is within scope. True or false?
False.
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 That's correct. VITA sites are required to conduct quality reviews.
B.
B is correct for every return. So we do not do self-review. All of our reviews are peer-to-peer. So we have to do a quality review for every return prepared at the site. Number 7, in most cases, a volunteer must review photo identification for every taxpayer to prevent the possibility of identity theft.
True.
A.
A is correct. That's true. When does the taxpayer sign the tax return?
D.
D.
C.
Ooh, so
Wait.
this one's a little tricky.
It's after
It's
and after.
It's D.
It's
The answer
D,
is
so
B.
D.
It's
the answer is D, as in
D.
dog. So it's
D.
after the quality review and after being advised of the
responsibility.
responsibility for the accuracy. So it's after everything. So we want to make sure that they're aware of their liability and responsibility, and they're definitely not signing it before we do a quality review.
All right, it's D.
Yep, D is correct. The site is busy with many taxpayers waiting for assistance. All the volunteers are busy. Can you quality review the return you just prepared instead of waiting for someone else to quality review the return?
C.
C.
D.
C, self-review is never an acceptable option. We always have to do peer-to-peer. And which of the following is true?
C.
C, quality review is an effective tool for preparing an accurate tax return. Great job. All right, that is the intake one. Let's get down to the advanced. Pages. All right, here we go. All right, so this is Sharon's scenario. We can see that Sharon's husband, Daniel, moved out of their home. She's got one child, age 10, that she will claim as a dependent on a return, 31. So does Sharon qualify for the head of household filing status?
Yes.
A.
Yes.
Yes, that's true.
Yes.
Who qualifies to claim the earned income credit for Leah?
A.
Sharon. A.
A is correct. It's Sharon. And Sharon is true or false? Sharon is required to report her lottery winnings as income on her federal tax return.
True.
True.
Yes.
Yep. If it's income, then they're going to want to see it. All right, here's Jeff's scenario. We see that they are looking to claim the child tax credit. For Jeff and Jane, what is the maximum amount that they are eligible to claim for the child tax credit?
B, 4,000.
B.
That's correct. It's B, $4,000. The Springs qualify for the child and dependent care credit. True or false?
False.
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 False is correct. We've got Mary, and Mary is eligible to contribute an additional blank to her HSA because she is age 55 or older.
1,000. C.
Yep, it is C, 1,000. Number 7 on Form 8889, Part 1 is used to report HSA contributions made by
D.
D.
D, all the above. What is the total unreimbursed qualified medical expenses reported on Form 8889, Part 2?
B.
B is correct. It's 3620. For number 9, for the purpose of determining dependency, Carrie could be the qualifying child of
C.
C.
Yep, this one's a little tricky. So technically it could be either Cheryl or Cindy. So C is the answer.
Yep.
So we would need to work with them to determine if they would want to come to an agreement on who's claiming them, or if there's a disagreement, we'd have to do the dependent with multiple dependent test. Which of the following statements is true?
D.
D.
D is the correct answer. None of these statements are true. Number 11, Elizabeth can claim the $1,500 homeowners association fees as a deduction on her Form 1040 Schedule A.
False.
False. That is not true. And what is the amount of gambling losses she's eligible to claim as a deduction on her Schedule A?
2,000.
2,000, because you can only claim up to the amount of the winnings. David is eligible to claim the American Opportunity Credit on his 2024 tax return. True or false?
I think false.
That's going to be false. He was less than a half-time student. He was only taking 2 courses.
For his
Um,
job skills. Yeah.
Yeah,
false.
so he might be eligible for lifetime learning, but he's not eligible for American Opportunity. And for which of the following IRA distributions will David owe an additional tax of 10%? So I think this is the one.
Oh, it's C.
It's C. That's what I got.
C for this one?
D.
C.
I think it's C.
It's C.
So this is
Because-
actually one of the 2 that I missed. I think it's D now. I'm pretty sure
D.
that I put B, but the
me check
emergency
my-
repairs
hold on a
are
second.
added to the exemptions for the 10% tax. So I believe this
D.
one is D.
Oh.
Karen or Denise, am I right on that?
It's D.
Yeah, it's D.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so it's D. So yeah, because the tuition is an
Oh,
exemption.
right, neither one.
Right,
Okay.
so neither one. So yeah, tuition's an exemption and emergency situations could be an exemption. I don't think we're gonna have much time for me to get into the tax layer, but we can still go through the questions. All right, number 15, what is the taxable portion of Faith's pension from Liberty Enterprises using the simplified method?
C.
C.
That is C, it is C, it's 19,519. The Hunters are eligible to claim the credit for other dependents on their tax returns. True or false?
True.
True is correct. What is the total amount of other income reported on the Hunters Form 1040 Schedule 1?
D.
C. C. D.
B.
So this was the second one I missed. I'm pretty sure the
It was
answer
D.
is D.
D as in day.
Yeah, D. The answer is D. So when I missed this the first time, I forgot to go back and add jury duty as income
Yeah.
because even though jury duty, I say you have to double dip on because even though you deduct that, you still have to add it as income. You know, I don't know why we have to do that, but you have to put on jury duty twice. Once as a deduction and once as the income. So I had originally left it off and I think I put C, but you do have to add the jury duty. So that would be on their Schedule 1, bring the total to $1,130. Number 18, Vincent is eligible to deduct qualified educator expenses in the amount of
300.
$300.
300 is correct. What is the Hunter's standard deduction on their 2024 tax return?
D.
D.
D, 30,750. Which of the following expenses qualify for the American Opportunity Credit?
D.
D. D is in dog.
D.
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 So it's going to be D. The key word here is required. So if it was like optional books that they got or optional equipment, that would not count. But since they're saying it's required for the courses that they were taking, that would count as an eligible education expense. We know that tuition is, parking pass is not. So the answer here is going to be D. The taxable amount of Faith's Social Security income as reported on their 1040 is
D.
C. C.
So the answer is C. What is the Hunter's total federal income tax withholding?
D. D is in
D.
dog.
D is
D.
correct. All right, moving along. All right, the net short-term capital gain reported on Stephanie's Schedule D is
250.
250. That's right. Which of the following can be claimed as a business expense on Stephanie's Schedule C?
A.
A is correct.
A.
Stephanie can take a student loan interest deduction of $3,750. True or false?
False.
False.
False is correct. What is the total standard mileage deduction for Stephanie's business on Schedule C?
C.
C,
C
C,
is correct. The amount of Stephanie's lifetime learning credit is 480. True or false?
true,
True.
True. What is Stephanie's additional 10% tax on the early withdrawal from her IRA on Form 1040 Schedule 2 Part 2?
C,
C is correct. To avoid having a balance due next year, Stephanie can use the IRS withholding estimator to calculate her tax liability and estimate a new Form W-4 to increase her tax withholding. Is that true or false?
true,
That is true. So that's something we encourage taxpayers to do if they see that their withholding didn't cover for the year. I always encourage them, like, go talk to payroll, update your W-4, and try and avoid this in future years. The last scenario, what is Joe's most advantageous filing status?
D,
D, qualifying survivor spouse, and because he does have a dependent to meet that filing status. Joe adjusted gross income on his 1040 is
C,
C, 42,112. Is Joe eligible to claim the child tax credit?
true,
True. Joe's retirement savings contribution credit is
A,
zero for Joe. And the total amount of Joe's net premium tax credit on Form 1040 Schedule 3 Line 9 is 696. Is that true or false? That is
True.
true. And last question, Joe's child independent care credit Form 2441 is
630.
630. That's correct.
That's correct.
Perfect. So I know we're running pretty low on time. I'm sorry to go through that so quickly. You know, if you do want to get more information about that, know that we'll be sending out the recording from the 3rd new volunteer session. And I believe Ms. Rucker probably would have had more time where they were when I left from session 2 to go through this in more detail. So that'll be a recording available to y'all. If you have any questions about any of these on the advanced exam, just know that you can go to the end of that 3rd session recording and they'll probably be diving a little deeper into it. I'm sorry I didn't have the time to pull up TaxSlayer and go through these scenarios, but you know, I just wanted to make sure I didn't want to keep y'all here too long past 9 o'clock. But that's pretty much all I've got. Are there any questions about any of that? Well, if there are no questions, let me put my email in the chat. If y'all need to follow up, I'm happy to help with anything.
Hey, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, under VSC, what did you get for number 10?
On the volunteer standards of conduct, number 10 was A.
Right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Hunter, before they leave, I need to share something once you put that in. I have one thing I want to share with the people.
Oh yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, have you stopped sharing?
I have.
Okay, let me get in here so I can try to share. All right, share. Get back.
Oh, that.
Okay, can you all see that?
No.
Not
No.
yet.
Not yet. It's just saying you're trying to start
Um,
sharing.
It's like it's loading or something.
It's still not there. Is it there yet?
Nope.
Now it's saying double
Then
click
it's
to enter.
paused. Why is it? And what is it saying now?
Is it something I can bring up? Nothing?
This is crazy. It's on my screen. Your screen is paused. Why is it paused?
Is it a phone? Is this a pub or something you want me to bring up?
It's still not there.
No.
Okay, so Hunter or either Karen, go to IRS Gov and pull up the 6004. I want to share this so that people can see what they can do for our clients. I say I'm sharing. I ain't sharing.
Honey, you got it.
I
There
got
it
it.
is.
Is
There
that
it
it? Is that it?
Oh, okay.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. This
It's
is
kinda
something,
small.
yeah, it's kind of small, but I just want to make you aware. I just want to make you aware of this. This is a form that, you know, we're all in this modern age, with smartphones and everything. So when people come in and they need to know where to go, like for instance, the fourth one on the second row, it says get identity protection PIN. They can take a picture of that or any of the other things there, and it'll take them directly to where it is they need to go to take care of those matters. Any questions?
What pub did you say this was?
6004.
Okay, for the QR codes. Okay.
Yeah, these are the QR codes, and like I said, at the bottom of it, I know it's small, but at the on the second row, it has for them to sign in or set up an account on IRS. The second one says payment, IRS mobile on the go, the identity theft PIN. So, yep, look at make sure that you post these at your site somewhere or either on your desk where that you can get to, and they can take their phone, take a picture, and deal with what they have to deal with.
Copy that.
That's
Any
awesome.
any
Awesome.
questions? Yeah, I wanted to make sure I told y'all this. See, they got the taxpayer advocate, all of this, earned income tax, credit assistance, everything that they could possibly think about that they would need help for. They can just take their phone, click it. They say click it and ticket, click it and roll on in.
Thanks for sharing.
Okay, Hunter, I finished. Thank you guys so much for coming in. And I hope that we took care of matters for you and that you are prepared to go to work the week of the 27th.
Does anybody have any questions?
No, ma'am, I don't.
Thank y'all all for being here. How did y'all feel about this? Do you think, like, is this better than the 5-hour or 6-hour session, whatever we did last year? Because I know if y'all are returning, you know, I feel like we cover a lot of the stuff you already know. If it's the year where there's been a lot of changes in tax law, that's one thing. But when it hadn't been like this year, like I feel like this worked out pretty well. Like I hope this is all right with everyone.
Yep.
It was.
I
Yeah,
think
so
next
actually-
year, next year we're gonna have a lot of changes.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll see. Who knows?
One last question. Are the sites still the same, like where Hickory Hill was at the church? Are they still going to be at the church this year?
We're at Divine Life again this
Yeah,
year.
Divine
yes, ma'am.
Life. Yeah. Okay.
And
Like
they
them-
will be sending out a listing of where all the sites are.
That's right.
Southland Mall is still where it was.
And so is United Way Plaza, the headquarters.
We try and keep things as consistent as we can. So we'll be back at Divine Life, and all of our other super sites will be at the same location. The mobile team might be going to a few new places, but like they said, you know, we'll send out the full schedule with everything on it. Most of it's the same as last year.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank y'all so much. Y'all have a great evening. If you have any questions, feel free to email them to me. Full transparency, I'll probably answer them tomorrow morning because I've been working for 12 hours straight, and I'm going to go to bed.
Okay. Well, good night.
Good night, y'all.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Goodbye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.